Hey, hi, hello. Welcome to Diana Emerson. Today we're listening to A&E. Husband keeps murder secret from his wife. Investigative.
I went to the authorities. I told them that a man was up in Hamilton County strangling people.
You cannot be married to somebody and then be killing people and marrying them in your backyard and you not know something.
20 or 30 young gay men have been murdered here with no one particularly doing anything about it.
Those person's final resting place for my peaceful backyard. I have not a clue how that happened.
Hello, I'm Bill Curtis. She knew him well. They'd been together just about forever. So when that question started nagging at her, she was confused. The question is one that married people all ask themselves at some time or another. How well do you really know your spouse? The first time police knocked on her door, Julie Baumeister's answer was confident. She knew her husband, Herb, better than anyone else did. And then she discovered something very strange in the woods around their lavish suburban home. Tonight on Investigative Report, the story of a man who may have been the worst serial killer in Indiana's history. His victims could number over 50. It's a look into one of the more bizarre stories of double lives about a man whose trail of murder went from exclusive night spots right into his own backyard.
Westfield, Indiana, a place of peace, quiet, and traditional family lives. Just 20 miles from the lively metropolis of Indianapolis, but light years away from urban woes. Or so it seemed.
The remains of three people, possibly more, have been found at Fox Hollow Farm.
It's not every day that police find human bones scattered through your neighbor's
Friday,
property.
more human bones were discovered, yielding the largest find to date. Police will theorize about the grisly discoveries, but some ominous signs are
The bones
emerging.
appear to be from teenagers or young adults.
The discovery of the bones on a Westfield estate was a final chapter of a mystery that had begun 3 years earlier in downtown Indianapolis.
Back in 1993, we had a number of missing persons cases that had some commonalities.
May 28th, 1993. Johnny Bayer, 20 years old. Last seen on his way to a job at McDonald's. July 1993. Jeff Jones, 30. Last seen coming out of a Salvation Army rehab center. July 31st, 1993. Richard Hamilton, 20. Last seen leaving his apartment at 2 a.m. to get cigarettes. August 7th, 1993. Alan Livingston, 28. Last seen getting into a white vehicle. That same night, Manuel Resendez, 31, went to a nightclub with some friends. When it came time to leave, the friends couldn't find Manuel.
It's hard to know in the beginning whether to look at it as just an individual situation or that possibly these things are linked.
The next year, the disappearances continued. June 6, 1994. Alan Broussard, 28. Last seen leaving a gay bar that he frequented. And then a disappearance that would shift the investigation into high gear. Roger Allen Goodluck, 33, disappeared on July 22nd, 1994.
We had a nice day that day, though. We were out in the backyard, and I had a little yard bench, and he tried to help me put it together. He'd got a new cat, and we were playing with that and talking. And I think he took some pictures of my flowers that day. Then later in the evening, he got all dressed and he left to go. He took the bus, and that was the last time I seen him.
Catherine reported her son missing the very next day and demanded action. But by law, the Missing Persons Department doesn't start a full investigation for 30 days. Catherine couldn't sit back and wait.
I realized that I had to do something. So that's when we got the private detective.
The police don't get real involved with adults who are missing like that if there's no clues, no reason to believe that something bad has happened to them. In other words, you're an American citizen. If you want to disappear, you have that right.
Within the next few days, they put flyers up every place and talked to people. The first day, they must have talked to 50 different people.
A friend of mine seen him get in a car. He was hitchhiking downtown here, hitchhiking towards home. And he seen his car that picked him up. He waved at Alan, yelled at Alan, and Alan waved back at him. And just last time anybody seen him.
Right then, with Alan Broussard and Goodlett being missing so close to each other, within a month of each other, in the summer of '94, it's like, what is going on here?
Indianapolis is a hub for gay life in the Midwest, home to a dozen gay bars and 3 gay newspapers. For people fleeing conservative rural hometowns, the big city provides community and relative tolerance. But in the summer of 1994, after 7 young men from the community had already vanished, people began to ask questions.
These people started appearing on bulletin boards at bars and clubs around town. And then the phone started ringing because people started going, do you know anything about this? We saw this. So we started writing stories, and it was a really good thing because the local media has absolutely ignored this story up until the very end.
The mainstream media's silence reveals a basic fact of life in Indianapolis. The gay community still faces an inhospitable reception in the public arena.
Indiana is a very conservative state. Indianapolis is a conservative city. This is not a place that has a well-organized gay and lesbian community that's very politically active and is able to speak out with a lot of public impact when the gay and lesbian community is adversely affected.
July 1994, only days after Roger Goodlett disappeared, Stephen Hale, 26, vanished from outside Indianapolis Central Library, a known gay cruising area. He was the 8th young man with ties to the gay community to vanish during the summer months in just 2 years.
One difficult part, I think, was we just had information about, gee, all these guys are missing and no crime scenes, no nothing really.
Detective Wilson was nevertheless increasingly convinced that the disappearances were connected and that the missing men were in fact the victims of foul play. With no leads, she turned to the FBI Behavioral Sciences Unit for help.
They have, for years, contacted me when there would be an interesting case that they'd want a little bit of a slant on the psychology of it.
Profiles indicated that the perpetrator was a white male, mid-40s, probably bisexual, with above-average IQ. But it would take more than this to crack the case.
We knew if we ever had a survivor, that would be somebody we'd really want to pay close attention to, because possibly this could be somebody who escaped the fate that others didn't escape.
In August 1994, the police would get their first major clue from a man named Mark Goodyear, a friend of Roger Allen Goodlett.
Alan was missing, and they were looking for any kind of odd dealings here in Indianapolis, and I believed that I knew an odd person.
Goodyear told the police of an eerie encounter he had had with a man he met at a downtown bar. He had noticed the man before, around the Indianapolis bar scene. The man always came alone, kept to himself, and never seemed quite comfortable.
I walked up behind him, and he was reading the missing persons posting of Roger Allen Goodlett, and began talking to him. He was quite concerned about it. It wasn't a genuine emotion. It wasn't a genuine feeling.
The man's insincerity piqued Mark's curiosity. He wanted to know more.
When I saw him look at the posters, there was something there that told me that he had something to do with it.
Just 20 miles north of Indianapolis, but seemingly a world apart from the gay bars and the string of disappearances Detective Wilson was investigating. Herb and Julie Baumeister had carved out a privileged existence on their 18-acre estate.
We were really looking for a house that was somewhere out that had some space and kind of away from the city. And so I ran across it and I thought, this is just perfect.
When the Baumeisters moved on to the $1 million property, complete with indoor swimming pool and extensive wooded grounds, it was just the most recent chapter in what seemed to be a storybook life.
When I was a sophomore at Indiana University, the IU football team won the right to go to the Rose Bowl. And it was during the preparation to go to the Rose Bowl that I actually met Herb. My first impression was he was a lot of fun to be with. I enjoyed myself more when I was in his company. We were at IU in the hippie era when Republicans didn't really come out on campus. It was love and peace, and everyone kind of would space out on drugs and just talk in circles, and we never did that. Most of the things we did were just driving around, maybe getting a Coke here or there, and just had a good time. College is a great time. I wish I could go back. Sometimes much better than adulthood.
Herb and Julie got married in 1971, right after Julie graduated from IU. Herb's declared major was anatomy. He had hoped to follow in his father's footsteps and become a doctor. But despite his above-average intelligence, Herb never finished college.
When our family came along, Herb was very involved with the kids. I think we had very family-oriented values. We didn't have candlelight dinners, and we didn't run off on romantic weekends together. We were much more family love.
In 1988, the Baumeisters had founded a successful business, the Save-A-Lot thrift store. The children were in private schools, and in the summer, Julie and the kids would vacation at Lake Wawasee, while Herb stayed home to run the business. To all appearances, they were living the American dream.
We enjoyed life. My kids would go out rollerblading at night. They could ride their bicycles, getting muddy and going tramping through the creek, or playing out in the leaves, or just being kids. It was the perfect place.
But it was a good deal less tranquil in the Indianapolis bar scene in August 1994. Mark Goodyear was being made uneasy by the conversation he was having with a strange man by the missing persons poster. He had a hunch that this man knew something about the disappearances, and he wanted to learn more.
One thing led to another. Within 15 minutes, I'm in his car, going to what I've been told to be his employer's home in Hamilton County.
The men took Mark on a long and circuitous drive north until they finally arrived at a secluded estate, what seemed to be a quiet suburban family home.
The house was a very dusty place to be. Mannequins all over in different postures. I asked him about the mannequins. He told me that the owner didn't want to be alone. I was standing in the pool. He began to drop hints, as to what he was into. He placed a hose around my neck. This was not an attack. This was asking, are you into this? He liked to be strangled, so he asked me to strangle him or to hold his throat. So I did. He fell unconscious down into the water. Within a minute, he came to, looks directly up at me, and tells me of the rush that he has, the exhilaration of the whole experience for him.
That's what is known as sexual asphyxia. It does cause a heightened, accentuated sensation when oxygen is deprived to the brain.
He wanted to reciprocate with me. I allowed this. He ran away with his hands on your neck. Once he starts with this process, you don't want him to stop. You want it to continue. He could bring on a sort of ecstasy.
There are two potential thrills involved here. The one psychosexual physical sensation of heightened sexual feelings, but there's also that brinkmanship business of I'm about to die type of thing, and I'm taking this right to its zenith.
He told me what turned him on about it was seeing the eyes bulge out of the head, seeing the lips swell up and at times crack, the discoloration in the skin. He spoke as if he was in some sort of ecstasy or rapture. I told him that he was hurting people. I told him that I would be going to the authorities. He laughed in my face and told me that no one would ever believe someone like me. I contacted the private investigator. I told him that a man was up in Hamilton County strangling people.
When Mark reported his encounter, it was a huge break for police, a possible explanation for what may have befallen the missing men and where.
We tried to find this place at that time, which was August, and there were a lot of leaves on the trees. Then we went back later in the fall when it was more to be seen, and I know we went at least 3 times, and we just simply couldn't find this location. Now, this guy did not identify himself by his right name. So for a period of time there, we didn't know who he had this encounter with, and we didn't know exactly where it happened.
Their tantalizing lead evaporated, and the investigation was stymied. Unbeknownst to them, on the very property that they were so desperately looking for, a playful walk in the woods was about to produce a grisly discovery.
Early in the year of 95, my son and a friend of his had been walking in the backyard on a Sunday afternoon. And he came to the back door downstairs and said that he had found bones, and we went and looked, and they looked like human bones. There was actually a head or a skull or whatever, a round thing. And then there was a slight amount of other bones there as well. Herb wasn't home. When he came home, I took him out and I said, look at this, Johnny. He said, oh, those are the bones that were in the garage that were Dad's. When Herb offered his explanation that they were ones that his father had had in medical school and been out in the garage, I really didn't question that. Herb saved everything. Nothing was ever thrown away. That's where he said they came from. He would clean them up. The next time I went out there, within a week, they were gone. I really didn't think a lot more about it.
Julie did not call the police or mention her son's discovery to anyone. Meanwhile, that winter, the investigators were still desperately trying to identify Mark's mysterious man.
This man continued to call Mark. He was very interested in Mark. And we put a trace on his phone, and that he was calling from a cell phone, so those things aren't traceable.
He would try to get me to meet with him. He would make comments like, for us to get together for a repeat session. He told me that he was familiar with death. He never confessed to murder. He called them accidents, mishaps, bad nights. Things got out of control, he would say. I knew when he was talking that way that a death had occurred.
These so-called accidents fit a scientifically documented pattern of sexual asphyxia taken too far.
Killing probably never was the intention. It was the process that was important here.
Seeking a greater and greater high, an asphyxiation addict may increase the periods of strangulation with each encounter.
at some point somebody did die. And that one was accidental. But anything less than that now is not exciting anymore.
But after his first accident, the asphyxiation addict makes a conscious decision to continue.
After a few times, then you know you're going to that point and you're going to take them all the way to death. So I think it was an escalation.
It was now 1995, and men with ties to the gay community were still vanishing. April 1st, Michael Kearn, 46, was reported missing, but he didn't show up at the factory where he worked. In August, Jerry Williams Comer, 35, disappeared. His car was later recovered from an Indianapolis shopping mall. He was the 10th man to vanish in less than 3 years.
So certainly by this time, whoever's killing them is a serial killer.
But there would soon be a major break in the case, and it would point directly to the successful suburban businessman, Herb Baumeister.
By August 1995, 10 men in 3 summers had vanished without a trace from Indianapolis bars. A year after Mark Goodyear had his first encounter with the mysterious man, he finally spotted the man again in a downtown bar. Mark asked a friend to follow the man outside and write down his license plate number, and then went to the police with the information.
They were able to get me a plate number, and from then on, we really had something that we could focus on.
The car was registered to husband, father, businessman, suburbanite, Herbert Baumeister. After 3 months of background checks, Detective Wilson went to his Save-A-Lot store to confront him about the missing man.
My first impression of Mr. Baumeister when I first saw him at the store was, this is a very strange man. He was very tall and angular, and his hair, possibly he had hair color in it. Physically, he looked effeminate, but he was so very nervous. I felt like we kind of pushed him to the edge just approaching him. He just looked like he was about ready to fall apart.
Baumeister denied ever having been in the gay bars until he was presented with the fact that his car had been seen there.
He was upset about that, and I guess that's understandable. He has a wife and 3 children, and he said nobody in his family knew the fact that he goes into the gay bars.
But when the investigators requested permission to search Baumeister's property, he refused. Their only alternative, approach his wife.
I wasn't sure, that Herbert Baumeister had anything to do with any of these missing men, and I felt like to approach a lady and tell her something that she didn't even know about her husband. It was a tough decision, but I decided we needed to either rule him in or rule him out.
One day, they called me in the back room. My cashier called and said, there's 2 people here to see you. And I walked up front, and they identified themselves as being from the Indianapolis Police Department and said that they were investigating her for a homosexual homicide. And I cannot begin to tell you the degree of life that left my body at that point. I just went blank and thought, what is homosexual homicide? I can define the word homosexual. I can define homicide. Now, how do you define them together?
She was pretty upset when we told her it had to do with missing men.
I just wanted them to leave so I could cry. And they finally did leave, and I cried.
Over the following weeks, Julie's shock and sadness about her husband turned to anger and disbelief.
I called Mary Wilson back several times and really challenged them to say, I don't believe you. This isn't the person I know. This is not someone I have ever in my life seen yell to the point of slapping his children. I've never seen him throw anything. He has never even come close to even giving me a bruise by holding my arm. And you're trying to tell me he killed someone? It didn't add up.
She seemed to pretty much be in shock, but she did not let us come on the property at that point.
I said, if you've got evidence, get a search warrant. I said, I'll be happy. I'll take you on a guided tour. I'll have a lunch for you.
But with only circumstantial evidence, Detective Wilson couldn't get a search warrant.
It takes probable cause to believe that a crime has been committed, and we simply didn't have it. We had Mark's story of what had happened up there. We had missing people. And that was about it.
Unable to get on the property, Detective Wilson took the advice of a forensic anthropologist, Dr. Stephen Meraki, and conducted a search from the air. Using an infrared camera that would detect the heat of decaying bodies, the investigators searched for grave sites. Though inconclusive, the helicopter search left the investigators more eager than ever to get on the property. But both Baumeisters were still denying them access. Despite their united front, however, there was trouble at the Baumeister home.
Herb had left the house, and we spent the Christmas season a year ago apart. It was a very horrible financial time for the businesses, a strenuous time in our relationship.
In fact, the Baumeisters' business was floundering, and they were on the brink of foreclosure. All around them, their dream life was collapsing. Julie filed for divorce in January of 1996.
I think that Julie was in significant denial at that point as to what was going on. I wasn't sure she was really hearing what was being told to her or understanding what was being told to her. And she asked me to contact Mary to try to get some information to help resolve those questions.
I was pretty impressed with him. He called me off and on and just said, don't give up this lead.
If Detective Wilson had any doubts that she was on the right track with Herbert Baumeister, Bill Wendeling's hints erased them.
I never, of course, I could not tell her some information that was confidential with my client.
Obviously, he knew something that he couldn't say.
It would seem that Julie Baumeister had told her attorney a crucial bit of information that she had not mentioned to the police, that her son had found a skull in her backyard. Julie Baumeister would soon change her mind and allow police to search the woods around their estate. In June 1996, in the midst of a maelstrom of financial and marital troubles, Herb Baumeister's erratic behavior pushed Julie too far. He impulsively closed down one of their stores and took their only son on an unexpected vacation to Lake Wawasee.
I kind of thought, this is nuts. You just can't run away and forget it. And I didn't know what was happening, but I knew he was definitely distraught.
Herb was very angry, left the house with their son. Julie also indicated to me that she went to their personal bank account or an account that they used for their personal matters, and all the money was gone.
I became extremely concerned that of Herb's stability and absolutely frantic that our son was with him.
I left a voicemail message with Mary Wilson indicating that Julie would like to talk to her. And I indicated to her in that voicemail, if I remember correctly, that I thought it was very important that she take us up on that invitation.
Just before we actually had this meeting, the attorney said, okay, I am at liberty to tell you this, that the son had found a skull some time ago. And that, so that's when I knew, this was very serious. We sat down at the Baumeister farm and talked about what they knew.
I told them the story about my son having found bones in the backyard.
Mrs. Baumeister said it looked like someone had laid down and died. It was a complete skeleton.
They asked if they could see the area, and I took them back and showed it to them.
That particular day, it was very hot, and the underbrush in the woods were quite dense. And I didn't know whether I really wanted to go back to show the police officers the place. And certainly, I look back on it as mixed emotions as to whether I should have gone out there or not, because I'll never forget that experience.
One of the gentlemen looked down and said, "Well, I think this is a bone." And he picked something up. And I think from that point, I was total blur.
Julie's reaction was one of utter shock. As a matter of fact, I worried about her just falling over and she turned away. And to my knowledge, I don't think she saw anything. I looked around at my feet, and as macabre as it may be, found teeth.
I remember someone saying, "Get a plastic bag before you pick it up." Someone said, "I think there's something else over here."
We've got these items to Dr. Naraki's lab, and he said, yes, these are forensic human remains. These are not anybody's model or anything like that. This is human remains.
Sometime later, they called back and said that they had been diagnosed or identified as being human.
An extensive search of the property began.
I didn't know. Mary hadn't had a chance to call me. I guess it was on TV, and one of my neighbors accidentally told me that they were finding bones.
Police won't theorize about the grisly discoveries, but some ominous signs are emerging.
As we get the backhoe digging, they keep recovering bones every time they dig. When we went on the property, we found numerous fragments of burned bones, hand bones, finger bones, teeth.
The bones were divided into two major areas. The large, intact bones were found on the west side of the property by the stream. The smaller fragments were found directly behind the dwelling and were burned into tiny pieces.
In fact, we had found about 5,000 fragments of this size or smaller that needed to be pieced together and analyzed. We found 7 of these left first metacarpals, which are the bone here at the fleshy part, the base of the thumb. And with 7 left ones, we know that we have a minimum of 7 individuals, 4 of whom have been identified positively based on dental remains.
The remains were identified as 4 of Detective Wilson's missing men. Roger Goodland, 33. Stephen Hale, 26. Manuel Resendez, 31. And Richard Hamilton, 20.
They come knock on my mom's door and told us that one of them was identified as my brother. It broke my heart. Because we tried so hard to find him.
As the search for the bones expanded, Detective Wilson drove to the Lake condominium and took custody of the Baumeister son from his father. But they let Herb Baumeister go. It would have been a prime opportunity to question or detain the only suspect in the deaths. But it was an opportunity that Detective Wilson couldn't take.
Once a body is found on someone else's jurisdiction, I go from being a lead investigator to being someone who's assisting.
Hamilton County officials had taken over the case.
We did not question Mr. Baumeister at the time. What we want to do is see exactly what we had first before we developed a plan of action.
To go the second day and bring the suspect in when you weren't even sure what you had up there, I can understand their side of it, but at any rate, it was their decision.
I kept asking them, "Where is he? Where's Herb?" And no one knew. They didn't know. And I didn't know.
It was June 1996. Julie and her children were virtual prisoners in their own home as the police dug up their backyard. And now it was Herb Baumeister who seemingly had disappeared, and his wife still had heard nothing from him.
The morning of the 4th of July, I got up very early, and I saw car lights come up towards the house. It was my attorney, Bill Wendelin, and he had come to tell us that he had received a phone call that Herb had been found dead in Canada, and that he had taken his own life.
Mr. Baumeister committed suicide by a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The note that he left talked about his failing businesses, his failing marriage, and his children, and mentioned nothing concerning this investigation.
It was the ultimate arrogance of, I will even die and take my own life before you will win.
Herb's last words in the note were, "I'm going to eat a peanut butter sandwich and go to sleep." The police now had to put together a puzzle with the main piece missing. Baumeister was not simply the devoted husband and father seen here on home video. Christmas, 1994, 2 years before his death.
This Christmas, all that I want is world peace. But I can't have world peace. I'd like some of those red and green M&M peanuts and a big hug. That's all.
This at a time when there were as many as 8 skeletons in his backyard. In order to reconstruct what could have linked the seemingly family man to a backyard full of bones, the police canvassed the gay community.
He did lead a double life. Mr. Baumeister would not tell his wife of other activities that he was doing, such as leaving the residence at night and not coming back for a day or two at a time, and then ended up being prowling bars.
The police discovered another man whose story confirmed 2 crucial aspects of Mark Goodyear's account: Herb's sexual fetish and habit of taking men back to his estate.
We have found an individual who had a sexual relationship with Mr. Baumeister where erotic fixation was discussed, but this individual was not into that. Going from Opeece up to someplace north was also discussed, but this individual did not want any part of that as well.
Yet these revelations of Baumeister's double life were largely downplayed by the media, which still described him as a businessman and a landowner. In contrast, the media seized on the fact that some of the victims had prior prostitution arrests, raising anger in the gay community.
The story has been treated like almost these people deserve to die. The news even went so far as to call these people, quote, men on the margins of society, homosexuals and prostitutes. Had they been dentists and doctors and lawyers and bank tellers, you would have seen action a lot more than what you saw.
The investigators immediately ruled out Julie Baumeister as a possible accomplice. Her calendar confirmed that she was away from home on each date that a victim disappeared. Still, this does not satisfy the grieving families.
I feel very angry toward the Baumeisters because they first found bones in 94, and that's when my son was missing. She said she went back and looked for the bones where they were at, and the bones were gone, and then she says, "Oh, I just forgot all about it." And it could have been my son.
Nobody, from the time that she was contacted by Mary Wilson in November of 1995 until Herb's death, and presumably since that time, has shown up missing. So our hope and desire is that nobody ever was harmed by the fact that she didn't go to the police.
The facts confirm that all the men who disappeared did so before the police contacted Julie Baumeister. However, at least 2 men, Michael Kiern and Jerry Williams Comer, did vanish after Julie first saw the bones in her backyard and did not report it.
I know there are people who say how did Mrs. Baumeister not know the successful serial killers have almost like multiple personalities? They can lead what seems to be a normal life and no one have any suspicion that they're involved in any kind of bizarre activity.
I'm the one person that didn't know anything. I wonder why a lot of other people didn't say something. It was going on under their nose and no one said anything. Nothing under my nose.
And while it is true that the disappearances were occurring 20 miles south in Indianapolis, the investigators concluded that over time, the bones were being dumped closer and closer to Julie's back door. According to the FBI profiler, this pattern of bone dispersal has frightening implications.
Just leaving bodies casually on the back of his property when he has even children running around playing on that property, that's arrogantly confident, and that comes from high intelligence and a long experience of success.
Investigators are looking into whether Baumeister's success could include the so-called I-70 murders, where the corpses of at least a dozen men were found alongside the interstate that links Indianapolis with Columbus, Ohio. All the men were killed during the spring or summer months, and all disappeared from the 3 to 4 block area frequented by gay men in Indianapolis.
From 1980 to at least 1990, young men with ties to the gay community in Indianapolis began to disappear and then turn up weeks or months later in isolated rural locations, most of them strangled to death.
Herb insinuated to me that he had killed between 50 and 60 people. I believe at least 50 from what I know and from what I've seen.
And Herb and Julie Baumeister moved onto their estate in 1992, just 1 year after the I-70 murders stopped. And the very same year, the people who were later found in his backyard started to go missing. And it turns out, Herb Baumeister did make frequent business trips to Ohio during the period in question.
There were probably, in the 9 years of the business, probably 100 trips made through Ohio. Whether any of those he traveled alone, I have no idea, but I don't think so.
Whether Herb Baumeister acted alone is a troubling question that may never be answered. With their prime suspects permanently beyond their reach, the police are desperately searching for someone who may know more. Shockingly, shortly before his death, Baumeister revealed that he indeed knew Mark Goodyear.
Herb had said the name of Mark Goodyear, and that we should be afraid of him. And I don't know who to be afraid of. I shouldn't be afraid of anyone. But I am.
Was Baumeister trying to protect his family? Or was he trying to cast suspicion on the one person who knew too much, who could tie him to the missing men?
I wish I could just sit here and just tell you exactly what happened. What am I supposed to say? I got my back to you because I don't want to be somebody's meal tomorrow morning. I mean, that's basically why I've got my back to you.
With all the fear, suspicion, and grief he left behind, perhaps Herb Baumeister's most haunting legacy is that those seemingly closest to us may in fact be the most unknown.
I know a great deal about Herb Baumeister. I know more about him than all the people on the face of this earth put together. But I know nothing about this other side. Nothing.
Diagnosis was compulsive personality disorder. Julie says she knew about the hospitalization, but only learned the diagnosis after Herb's suicide. Since his death, life has continued down a strange path for the Baumeister family. Their children out of their suburban estate and back into the city of Indianapolis. Soon after, she filed for bankruptcy. Meanwhile, the case of Herb Baumeister continues. The police are still looking into other murder sprees that may have been committed by the businessman living a double life. The possibility of Herb's involvement in the murders along I-70 is still being explored. I'm Bill Curtis.